We'll talk a little bit about writing. So very similar to what Stephanie did a little earlier, we're going to talk about how do those same tools that you use, can we use those in reading? So, but I need to ask a question before we get started. How many of you are working with primary? Middle school? High school? Okay, and are those students, if you're working with students in high school, are they students with disabilities? Okay. All right, so that helps me kind of think about what level we're going to work on with the reading strategies. Okay, so let's get started. So we're just going to talk about, mainly our focus today is how do we work with students to reinforce skills, and then we have students that have behavior issues, and then we have students that have an IEP. So generally that's what we work, the population of students that we work with. So a lot of times those kids need a lot of extra support. And so our intention is, how many times during the day are there times when you're working with kids that maybe there's a little bit of downtime, right? So what we wanted you all to be able to walk away with today is some tools to work with kids during those transition times. Maybe they finish their task and they need something to work on. Maybe you're running a small group or a station, or you're helping out in a classroom, or you're working with a special ed teacher. So there's lots of different times during your day that maybe you could stop and do some reading activities, or you could add to some of the things that we're already doing. So let me just going to jump on over here. So a lot of times, it's hard because you move around. I used to take a little basket when I moved around all the time with all my stuff in it, but it's hard to move around and have all your materials. So that was kind of why we did the binders today. So there's clear protector sheets, and we have those for you to put in your binders and keep them, and you can take those with you as you move around the building. We've got some things that you'll get this afternoon, some sensory kits and stuff like that, but we want you all to have your own stuff as you move around, because I know how hard that is to keep up with stuff. And so it's good to have things that are in your bag or in your binder, pencil bags, those kinds of things, because you just need stuff. And so what we're going to talk about today is multisensory. So most of the kids that we have with disabilities maybe need a different way to learn things. Like working with kids who have trouble with reading. Sometimes they may have dyslexia, maybe they have a learning disability, maybe they have attention deficit disorder, but those kids need a different approach sometimes. And so what we talk about multisensory is that we say it, we talk about it, we do it, we hear it, and we have their hands on it. So we think about just moving from letters and sounds, but what does that sound like, and what do we do with that as an activity in the classroom? And so I love this page right here, and you all have this like a front and back, and I'm just giving you all this because it's just got a little bit of information on it about, like right here, these are the things that kids have to know. And so for a long time, nobody ever told me that this is the way kids kind of learn how to read, like the process of how kids learn to read. We start out as infants and we develop language. And that means that I can say something and then the kids can respond, right? You know how language develops. We go into words and then sentences, but in order to learn to read, we have to break that down backward. We have to know what sentences are, down to words, down to into sounds, down to individual phonemes is what we call them. But for a long time, I didn't know what those were and how to go backward and how we learn to read. And so this kind of helps us, and I gave you all a copy of this one right here too. But like for kids, understanding spoken word, one of the first things they have to know is how many words are in a sentence. So if I give kids a sentence, the dog ran home, they have to be able to count those words. And so I'm going to give you all some strategies to help kids just do word count. Today we're going to do some activities with that. But when kids start for rhyming, that's in kindergarten, and I put those little blue signs beside of those tell you what are the skills that they're working on in kindergarten and what are the skills in first grade. And so they continue to go on and on. But if kids miss that phonemic awareness part or that phonics piece, even when they're in high school, they may be struggling with figuring out how to decode words or have a strategy to figure out how to read words or recall words. So we start out with rhyming words. That's why it used to be, we all listened to nursery rhymes, or we even read our own children nursery rhymes. Why we were doing that was we were teaching kids to recognize rhyme and those patterns for rhyming words. Then we got to figure out how to count syllables, because it's important, because once I can figure out words, then I got to break those words down into syllables. So cat is not just, we know it as C-A-T, but how many letters are in cat? We got to teach kids how to do it. How many letters is in cat? Cat, right? So they have to know how to break it down into 3 individual letters And so that's another skill that they have to know how to do. And then they have to know phonemes, right? They have to know like beginning letters, middle sounds, ending sounds, all of those things together in order to figure out words. And then we go in there, how do we do that? Like if we've got the word it and we add the letter S, what word do we have? Sit. What if we add the letter F? We drop the S and we add the letter F. It is fit, right? So that's the process of how kids learn. So when you're in working with kids, thinking about that and having this little cheat sheet to think about where are they at? Can they rhyme? Because if they can't, that's a great place to practice with them. And it's easy to practice rhyming words, right? There's all kinds of things you can do to practice rhyming words. And so this one is an example. So you have this sheet right with you in your notebook. So like if you're teaching, if you're working on rhyming, you're just listening to the end sounds of words. Like hat, cat, bat, sat. And so there's examples of all of those on that little cheat sheet I gave you. So if you're trying to figure out where kids are at or what to work on with kids, this gives you an idea of where to go back and reference it. And so we're going to talk about that with the spoken word. So I'm going to let you all get up a minute because y'all are tired and it's right midday. So I'm going to let you come up here and you think about how many kids would you have in a group if you're working with a small group of kids? Is it just you and 1 or 2 kids? Is it maybe up to 5 kids? 8? 9? So what I was going to let you do is in your pouches, you all probably have a couple bead strings, but we have bead string. I'm going to let you make and take back to your table enough bead strings to make a set for your groups that you work with. So I'm going to let you get up and come up here and get some bead strings, and I'm going to let you make some sets, and we're going to practice with those. So how many of y'all think you might need? You can come up here and get them, and I'm going to let y'all just get up and move and come up here. Y'all want to start over here at this table? And I'm going to let you just grab some beads, and you can grab a handful. You can choose white or red or blue. So how many you think you might need?
Just 2.
2. So go ahead and you're going to take 10. You're going to put 10 beads on each one of those strings. Go ahead and make you one right now. Yeah. You can mix them up if you want.
If I got 3 red and 2 white, then everybody want them.
Yeah. You can do all white and all red. You can do either way you want to. Yeah. Yep. And just make you one to start with if you want to. All right. So everybody got them a bead string made? Okay, let's back up here. Now let's talk about it. So let's say we're trying to work with kids and we're just getting them to break down a sentence, okay? So let's first use our string and we're just going to break down a sentence. So I'm going to have my bead string and I'm going to ask kids, I'm going to cover the left and I'm just going to pull the beads as I need them. So let's pull a bead for every word in this sentence, right? So let's start out with the dog ran away. So how many words are in that sentence? 4. So you see how you could have that with kids at the table? You're just counting words in a sentence. Then it gives them that visual, right? You can even have them space it out, but put their finger in it. Then I go back and I count how many words were in that sentence. So it teaches them how to break down that sentence into individual words. So that's one way you can use your bead string, and that's a fun little way for kids. They like to use those. You can use them for math also, but these are great to use for kids when you're working on those. We're going to talk about how you use them for a little older kids in a minute because you can use syllables, you can spell with them. There's lots of different ways that you can use your bead strings. So when you go back to school, and school's starting in a few weeks for many of us, you've already got your bag ready and you got your little small group ready. So if you wanted to practice those, you got some downtimes, here's some activities that you can do with them. So let's move on over here and talk about that one. The other ones are how else can we practice with rhyme? Because we said one of the things, kids got to know how to rhyme. So sometimes kids come and they haven't had practice with rhyme. So we can do some little activities with that. For this one is like you have them, if words rhyme, pat your shoulders, right? So if you have words, you pat your shoulders. So let's say if I give you the word hat, so you pat your shoulders, and then I say bat. Does bat rhyme? You pat your shoulders. Okay, hands back down. Mat, pat your shoulders. Then I say mop, hands back down, right? So it's something as simple as that, just having that movement. So that's what we're talking about, that multisensory, is getting kids moving as they learn. Another one is you've got your little paddle boards in front of you, and I think I gave everybody 5. If you need a few more, you can. Everybody has 5. So you can have those to take back with you. And so let's say you got a little small group. And so tell me, you're going to tell me yes if the word rhymes or no if it doesn't. So I'm going to say I'll just start with mat. Mat, bat, ball, top, mop, mat. Right? So kids have to listen and they have to continuously use those right there. So that's why I gave you those paddle boards. These, you can make them with a note card on a popsicle stick, right? There's all kinds of fun things that you can do. But remember, we're having kids do an action that connects them to that rhyme and sound. So we're making sure, do they know it? So if I'm asking you to hold that up, what can I tell real quickly? If they got it right or wrong, right? If you got it right or wrong, real quick, I can tell if they got it right or not. And you may have them hold it in front of them if they're looking at their buddy, right? They can have them just hold it right in front of them and then do it right here. You can lay it on the table and have them have it flip it, right? If they're trying to look at each other. So there's all kinds of things to do. So we wanted to make sure you guys had those as you start back this school year. That's a fun activity. You can use thumbs up and thumbs downs for all kinds of things, right? Math, reading, science, social studies, any class that you're in there with students. So that's our thumbs up and thumbs down. Now here's a fun one, and you all probably already seen these, but these right here are other ways that you can have then thinking about the syllables. So if you go back and look at that, we talked about rhyming, and then we talked about we have to move into syllables. So what are some fun ways to do syllables? And y'all may have already seen some of these. So this little girl right here, I always did it this way, but you put your hand under your chin and say banana. Just go ahead and try it. Try it yourself. Say banana. Banana. How many syllables do I have in there? 3. How do I know that? Yeah, every time my chin goes down, I have okay, let's try it. So banana. There's 3. Try helicopter. Helicopter. How many's in that one? 4. So we're just trying to get kids to break down those sentences down into individual words. You can also do a hand tapping if you don't want to use the hand, and if they're older, you can do banana or helicopter, right? Or anybody give us a word? Let's try it. Throw out a word. Anybody want to try one that we think has a lot of syllables? Elephant. Let's try elephant. Elephant. How many we have? 4. 4. Right, so there's all kinds of ways. So when you're working with kids and they're having trouble just working, if they're having trouble with syllables, and our older kids have to know how to break down words. So that's a word attack strategy for older kids. So that's not just a primary game, and you can change that. You know, some kids, some tap on the table. Banana. That's okay too. However they need to do it. They can pencil tap it if they want to hold their pencil. Banana. So it doesn't matter how they do it, but the action, but include the action of doing something along with them practicing or breaking down those words. So those are fun things that you can do in a station. Here's some more things. So in your bag, you probably got some Unifix cubes. You probably got like some Unifix cubes that were in there, right? Did y'all have some? So let's say you're doing that, and you can work in a group with kids. So let's say, this is a good one for banana. So let's look at, we're going to work on the word banana. So how many syllables did we know was in banana? Banana. So I might take away this one. So I'm going to have out on the table in front of kids, maybe right up there where kids can see it, I'm going to have those three Unifix cubes, right? And they're going to see that those are apart. And then I can put them back together. So I'm going to say banana, banana. So when I put them all together, what word do I have? Banana, right? Or they can even link the words if you do them sideways. Banana, and have them physically link the words back together. And that helps them understand the concept of taking apart words and putting them back together, because it connects that in the brain when you take those things apart and you put them back together. Right? So that's part of the brain research that we know, is that's how kids can learn that way. So those are fun little things that you can do also. So like here's pineapple, 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 right? So you can have them add them this way, you can have them do them this way, but make sure that whatever word that you're doing that they're practicing with, they have enough Unifix cubes to do it. So y'all should have some of those in your bag. So you can use them for math, or you can use them for reading in that way. So that's one way to use those. All right. And those are fun. Kids like those. If you're just working on syllables, You can use them for other things too when we get on over here. So you also got a sheet that was like those L. Conan boxes. And I gave you those, and you could get extra copies of them if you want to put in your bag. So every kid would have a mat, right? Every kid's going to have a mat. So if you have a mat and you're working on 3-syllable words, let's talk about banana. Banana. So what I would do is I'd have the mat down. Let me see if I got something to lay this on. I'll put it right here. Okay. And so if I'm doing banana, I would take those Unifix cubes and I would push them. Every time I said a syllable, I would push them into that spot. So there's a segment in there, and that allows kids to see the division of it, right? So I'm going to just put it right here so you can see it. But if I have this one here and I push it up, I take my finger and push it up. Ba-nan-na. Banana, right? And then I have them read it. Banana. I could have them write the word. I could have a picture of the word. But the action of pushing that stone, we call them push stones, but you can use tokens. You can use those little token cards that Stephanie gave you just a minute ago. All of those. The action of pushing those into those boxes helps the brain process that around that syllabication. It helps them know how to divide those letters and to break them down. And then when you put it back together, it helps them see how to put it back together. It's simply the action of it. It's the resistance or the action that you use when you're taking that. So just try it at your table. Try that word. Try taking, you got some cubes? Try practicing that. Just try banana with syllables, and you can see how it feels when you do that. So,
How many syllables does that make?
yeah.
We had that in first grade last year.
Oh, I know. Y'all have these sheets? Yeah, I'd tell them no bad words fit in the box. Yeah, high school kids are aside, aren't they? So you can talk about that. And so thinking about your kids, do they have all their letters and sounds? They maybe already do. So you would use these for segmenting words. You could do phrases and segment phrases. So you're teaching phrases with vocabulary, or you can do vocabulary words, and so there might be science words that they have to learn, like photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, right? So they're learning those words. So you may have to create a little bigger box even, but you could only fold and use for high school just that bottom box, right? Photosynthesis. So photosynthesis would work here. So you would just fold that and just use that one to help them segment the words, their vocabulary. So they could use that. So it would be appropriate for whatever age that you were using. So there's lots of different ways you can use all the tools because even high school kids can use manipulatives and use tools to learn. So there's different ways that you can do. So even photosynthesis fits right here. What was that other one we had in a social studies term was capitalism. Right? That may be a capitalism word. And so you're working with vocabulary with those kids, because a lot of times our kids have a vocabulary deficit, and so we're working on vocabulary words. How do you break those words down? Kids in high school, middle school need to know how to break down words, right? Because they have to look for root words or words inside of words for a clue to figure out how to sound out the word. So that gives them a strategy too. So you can adjust to whatever grade level that you work with some of the activities. And this is another one, the same kind of thing. Sometimes people use those little paint strips. They cost nothing when you go not at Food City. When you go to Lowe's or Walmart, you can get those for free and cut them up and let kids use those, right? So you can just have those strips and do the same exact thing if you're helping kids with vocabulary. Because the older they get, the harder the vocabulary is, and if they're in a specific class, the vocabulary is really hard, right? Because you may have like parallel, and you're trying to help them understand what parallel is or remember what parallel is. So you're looking for that vocabulary build. Here's another way. This one's just tap lights. But remember, everything you do, it's an action. The kids have to do something with that in order to help isolate the sounds and then put it back together. Because that's what you're asking them to do. Take it apart and put it back together. And that helps them understand the division between them. And so here's some for you to try to practice on your own. But these are hard. So here's some that's just a phoneme. Some of the words, ice. That's a hard one, right? To segment, to break that into two different sections. Because sometimes you'll ask yourself, is that word 2? Is it 3? Because I was asking myself that just a minute ago on helicopter, if I'd sounded that one out right. So there are some tricky ones. And on this list, you can see. Let's try one. Let's try champ. Champ. How would you see? What would you do at your table? Just take a second and think about it. How many is it? And how many is it? Three. Right, so we have to figure out, so if we're gonna do that, if it's chance, it's hard to see that. But anyway, so look for chance, same thing for trees. All right, but like rat is easy, but see, you see how it's hard for kids to figure out, you can't see me. No, they're mystery words. Mystery words. Mystery words. Mystery. Yeah, oh, that.
I can't even see the words.
I'll fix it, but I'm afraid if I fix it, my screen will take our screen. So we'll come back, we'll practice those in a minute, just got some more practice. So, phonological awareness. Before kids, so a lot of times we miss this part. Phonological awareness is what kids hear. So they say that's what you can do in the dark. They don't have to be able to manipulate letters, they just hear. So you don't have to know, they don't have to be able to write or do the letters yet. But a lot of our kids come without that phonemic awareness or that phonological awareness. And that's what we're talking about with being able just to recognize that there's words in sentences and that there's syllables, or you break down words, that there's pieces of words that they have to know. And so there are 26 letters in our alphabet, but there's 44 sounds. Right? There's 44 sounds. And so, you know, like you think about the F, right? But you look how it's spelled. It could be PH, it could be F, it could be GH, or the FF, like giraffe. So that's pretty complicated for kids, right? So that's why it becomes so complex. So we have to work on breaking those down into smaller units and helping them figure them out. So we have to teach spelling rules, and we have spelling all the way through, don't we? We have spelling all the way through middle school, all the way up. I guess at high school maybe they don't spell, but they still have to know spelling rules, right? Because I always remember I before E except after C, right? Think about some rules that you learned when you were younger. So those are some rules that you know, and kids need to know those. And so maybe if they don't have those skills, then that's where they get behind. So that's one way that we can have them do that. Now we're going to watch it. This one's a fun one. And we're just going to watch some of these. And you guys probably do these in class already, but you could do these in a small group if you wanted to. Right, you probably already do this. So listen to the sounds.
C. Cat. D. Dog. E. Egg. Bear. G. Goat. H. Act. I. Inch. J. Jet. K. Key. L. Light bulb. M. Mass. N. Nose. O. Octopus. P. Hand. Q. Queen. R. Rabbit. S. Sun. T. Toe. U. Up. B. Base. W. Walrus. X-ray. Y. Yo-yo. Z. Zebra.
All right. What did you notice about those letters? Did you notice anything or think about anything when we're listening to this? Do we say our letters right when we're working with kids? What do we say? When you say the letter, when you say the sound for P, what do you say? And listen, when you think about it, you add the UH on the end of it, like puh. Right? There's a difference the way we articulate our letters and our sounds. So if you say puh, I was bad to do that until I had to think about it and to kind of train myself not to add the UH on the end of the word. Like puh. And you know, like it puh. P is not puh, is it right? It's It's just a popping sound. So it's really important that kids hear the right way to say letter. So it's okay to play games like that or use those little videos and games to play with kids because they all have their own device now. Right? So there's like a whole series of Jack Hartman videos that you could use when you're working in small groups. And you probably already use them, but kids that are behind or that are difficulty or struggling learners or kids that have IEP, they have to hear things so many more times. An average student hears a vocabulary word 7 times. Well, a student with a disability may need to hear it 32 times or use it 32 times. So it depends on the severity of their disability. They need that repetition, right? So you got to keep practicing and practicing and practicing. And so that's when it's so important that, when you have minutes that you can work with kids, how can we use that time to do some fun activities, but also those activities that's building their skills. And that helps them learn and makes it go crazy. Another thing is to use, these are like sound tubs in most every school in Letcher County. I don't know how about Allen County, but most every school in Letcher County has sound tubs. But if you don't have a sound tub, you can still use pictures, you can still use things around the classroom if you're helping kids and they're struggling with a particular level. And there's another one. So for language arts, those bead strings that we gave you, you can use them for those individual spoken words. You can use them for blending, right? Those are other things that you can use when you get to blending. So let's say you're just working on constant vowel, constant words like cat, bat, hat. And kids are having trouble. So you're going to take your left hand, and you always have every kid move from left to right because that's the way we learn to read. Right? That's the way our brain works. Left to right, everything we do. So let's say we're going to do the word cat. We go at, cat, right? So we're bringing it down to individual sounds now. So we can use it for words, sounds, syllables, breaking down words to decode. There's all kinds of different ways that you can just pull these out and let kids use them. You can use them in math. So there's all kinds of ways. If you're working on some very complex photosynthesis and you're helping kids break down that word to be able to pronounce it correctly, you can do the same thing. Synthesis. So how many syllables are in that word, right? And they can do the syllables. Again, that helps with vocabulary, lots of different things. But they have something in their hand. And by doing that, remember I said the brain works from left to right, and that's the way we learn to read. So we track, everything we do, we track from left to right. So that allows them then to see how many syllables, but to track that, to reinforce that in the brain. So you can go back and count them. Again, you can have them space, because we always use that little finger spacing if you want to have to practice finger spacing, and then go back and count them. So all kinds of cool little things that you can do with something as simple as that right there. You can do spelling too. You can have them practice the spelling with them. If I'm trying to spell, I pull a letter for every one. Maybe I'm going to spell the word, let's shop. S-H-O-P, shop. I'm just practicing my spelling, right? But I'm moving those letters. Again, I'm reinforcing that brain pathway. That's just that. Practice, practice, practice. How many words is in that shop? 4 words, 4 letters in that shop, right? So that's an easy, quick way to do that. The older they get, you can do more things like that. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. We also have to practice activities that we practice with kids are taking away sounds and adding sounds. Like if you take away, if I have the word mom and I take away the P, and I put the letter T, what word do I have? Mat. So we're teaching kids to segment words and then to replace them. That's part of that learning to read and learning those sounds. So you can use a mat, you can use a trifold piece of paper, anything you want to use, but you can have three spaces. You can use your Elkonin boxes if you wanted to, if you're working with words here. You can have them, I like these if you had dry erase. You can cut these in strips if you wanted to when you were working with kids. You can take some extra copies too. But I might cut this in and I put it on my dry erase board. And I might take the word, and I have every kid write the word mop. M-O-P. Okay, let's erase the P. And let's replace the P with a T. M-at. What word do I have? Mat. So it helps them to practice that placing those words. So then the other thing I can do, and there's a fun one, sometimes I use little erase cards or whatever, but let's say I'm going to work on figuring out beginning, middle, and ending sounds. Something as simple as that. And I'm going to ask you, if I say this word, I'm going to ask you to put your put your sound, I'm going to say the word ma. What place does the letter M or M? See, I said M, M-U, right? M-U-A. But M, where is the M in ma? It's at the beginning, so they put their stone or they put their unifix cube on the beginning. Where on my placemat is the O sound in the word ma? Ah. It's going to be in the middle, right? They have to listen and then place those there physically. And the same thing, what's the ending sound? Where do I find it? In ma, at the end. And kids do that. And so you can make it, like I said, I cut these out in little strips. So I have my 4, I have my 3, I have my 5. So I have all of those. So I have a little folder. You have a folder full of all your little strips in there. You just pull out, because you're going to have some kids that might be a little higher. You're going to have some maybe a little lower that you work with throughout the day. But you have those right there. And you know what your kid needs. So that's the easiest way to do it. You can leave it with paper so they can write the words at the top or the bottom of it, either way you want it to do, but just cut those out in little strips.
What if you have a child semi-non-verbal, but you're trying to work on the 7-year letters?
Well, you could still you can know if they understood the sound by doing those, letting them use those. Even if they're nonverbal, you could still allow them to use the push stones because they tell you where the in the word ma is at, and they put it there. And so that would help you be able to kind of know, do they even understand that word? Because sometimes if they're nonverbal, they still comprehend, they just can't get it out. So that's one way to check to see. So you can use those same kind of things with the kids because they're the action is pushing it, right? Or placing it in there. Same thing, give them the unifix cubes and let them separate the word out. If I'm giving them 3 cubes, how many sounds are in ma? So I give them that. Because they don't have to be able to say or be able to respond that way. They just have to demonstrate. Do they know ma? How many sounds? Right? And if they're not saying it, they can still do the action. And that's a good thing for them. That gets them engaged. That keeps those kids involved so they're not so disconnected, right? That gives them something that they can do. Anytime you can put those in the hands of kids, just like Stephanie was talking about with math, it's got to be concrete. You got to be able to see it. And in our brains, so you got to see it, and then you can do it abstractly, and then you can do it all without thinking. Right now you know ma. But at first, you might need a picture. You might need a ma, right? Some kids might need a ma. And you say, here's a ma, ma. And that helps them connect to something they already know. And what we know about in the brain research and the science of reading is if they can connect that to something they already know, or they have a visual of that, then it helps them to be able to place that in their brain and helps them make connections for them. And that helps them. You know, a lot of times we miss those pieces of that concrete object, right? So that's why we were talking about those little sound tubs, those little boxes. If you have a mouse, and you're using the letter N, and all the kids get to touch a mouse, and they know what a mouse feels like, and they know what it looks like. You got a little stuffed mouse or a rubber mouse, and everybody gets to touch and feel what that sounds like. Then they got something to connect that to. So that's why those things are always so helpful. Alright, and it's the same thing with letter and number formation. So I gave you a sheet, and this one right here has letter and number formations. You can put this in your binder and put it on the clear protector sheet. Oh, yes, I was afraid some of y'all might have missed some of those when I didn't have them all laid out. But I would take the binder and I take a clear protector sheet, and you can have one for every kid. Or you just make them their own sheet, right? You just make a letter and they'll practice it at your station. But if you put them in your clear protector sheets, then you can use them over and over and over. So your binders are full of clear protector sheets. Have seven. Because when we're working on helping kids just form it. So those are great. I always like those. And that's a lot for any kid. It shows you kind of cheat sheet to show you how to teach them to make a letter. Right? Because you can see on the capital A, you go one down, and then another one down, and then across. But it shows you the steps, letter formation. So this is really nice. If kids are having trouble writing those letters down, you can always, and that can just be right in your thing. You can flip it over on the back, and you can say, okay, let's work on the letter A. So how do we correctly write the letter A? So we can come here. Right? We practice the formation, but it gives us the arrows. So it's okay that we start. We give kids an arrow, right? We might give them a green dot, or this is where you start to make the letter. And let's say this is red. This is where we stop, so say this is red. And so we can do that to help them learn to form letters, and then they follow up. So you can have them do that. Right, so you can have letters, but you show them how to do that. You can put red letters.
Is that it?
Right, it gives them a start and stop. Anyway, so those are things that you can do real quickly. If you got that right in your binder, so all you need is some dry erase markers and some clear sheets. And you have them right there with you. Any thoughts on that one?
When I was older, I went to all the third grade elementary school. There was a child that she was perfect, spot on. When there was sounding things out, she could sound them out perfectly. She could not spell them at all.
Yep.
Say she had the word shop, she would put, she wouldn't put an S in it. She could sound it out perfect. But she would say MELP
Right,
for shop.
right.
I mean, no sound at all
Yeah.
in words, did she, but like repeat.
So she could recall the letters, but she didn't have, so, that happens sometimes with kids, that that means they don't know the letters and sounds, right? Because if they can't reproduce them or they can't write them, they don't know. They can sound them out. And so I'm not sure what strategy, because you'll see sometimes you see kids that can recall, and they can sound out the words and read a whole passage to you and have no idea what they just read. Because that's part of the skill. They figured out how to recognize the letter, to figure it out, but they can't reproduce it. So that means they still don't know it, right? Because if they, in order to be able to reproduce it, then that's when you know that they know it. Yeah.
What if you've worked with a child constantly and they still refuse, like they will grab what you give them and just sling it at you?
Yeah.
Because
And that's where,
nothing's working.
and that, there's a couple different things maybe that's going on, and it might be a level of frustration, it's a communication issue, and you might have to work with them on behavior issues before you can get to that part with the letters and sound. It's maybe they have trouble communicating, and that could be very frustrating for kids. So maybe a system that they could
See,
do.
we've tried to come up with systems and they just don't work.
Yeah, so and so every kid's so different, it's hard to know, right? So every kid has something different, so it's hard to know what will work, but, they probably need some way to communicate. Maybe if it's just that they dot the letter, or you play the alphabet game, but thinking about how can they be successful? What do they already know? And let them have some practice at something they already know how to do before you give them some challenging tasks. Matching colors, so things that they can do, because it's
They
probably
can't even match color.
yeah. So can they move things around?
They can.
And do they like to do those kinds of things?
It gets through at you.
So I'd start, what can they do? And I think about some of the things that they can do, and I'd practice some of those, and then, add one thing at a time. Instead of adding 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different things, I might just add one thing at a time and let them practice that. It is probably either they can't tell you what they want, they're frustrated, it's hurting because they can't complete the task. There's some kind of something that's a barrier that you gotta be able to figure out before you can make progress with a kid when they're having struggle to do that, I believe. And it could be a communication. It could be, it could be that they have a picture, or they have some pictures on popsicle sticks. Like, am I sad? Am I happy? Am I angry? And they give you a popsicle about how they feel. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe their stomach's hurting. Maybe their head's hurting. Maybe the bus ride to school was terrible that morning. Maybe they're hot, maybe they're cold. So there's all kinds of things that might be impacting them before they ever get to the point where they can learn. And that would be an important thing, just to start a system of communicating. And then they have to like something, right? They might like music, so they might like listening to the alphabet songs, right? So you find something they like, and then you connect that, and then you build on that. And that's what's going to be. That's a trial and error sometimes. They'll have something they like, but it takes you a while to figure out what they want to do. All right. This one is just talking about working with letter formation. And on that, we got QR codes for all these presentations. Let's talk about if you're running a station. How many people in here are working with groups of kids at a small station? Some of you? Okay. So are you in the classrooms where they have stations? Anybody in here with classrooms that have stations? Anybody else? So I always include this one because how important is it that you can have 3 stations. So if you're in the room and you can take some of those things that you know about multisensory learning and have kids practice that way, that's always a good practice. So you can actually man a station in a room. If you're not in there and you're in the classroom, you ever got kids all the way around you that wants help too? Right? So you got some of those tools and resources to help practice with. Then you can work with the teacher station and then those independent stations. So a lot of times that you are in those classrooms, you could be running or manning a class. The whole time I was teaching, there was somebody in the room. I always used anybody that was living and breathing around anywhere to help because it takes all of us, right? It takes every single one of us working with kids every day, all day long to move kids. So if you see a chance to jump in, right? Help. That's one of the reasons we want y'all to have the tools that you have is because you're going to have kids following you around that need help too. They're in that class if you're in there with kids. So quick, easy things that we know are fun and a practice will help all kids. So we always do some little activities with reading groups. And so those are all activities that you could choose to use. And I'm going to show you guys a site in just a second where you can go find some resources for free. But here's the writing station, and so I shared with you guys some different things that you can do when you're working with kids. You can let them cut out things, you can let them tear paper, because especially younger kids or kids who are having trouble with grasping, you can let them tear paper, you can let them cut out objects. You can let them play card games, so you all got a card game now. You can, if kids are having trouble with colors, maybe you start with matching red. A deck of Uno cards has great because they're red, blue, green, and yellow, right? So if you're trying to teach kids colors, you say yellow, and you have them match yellow. You try red, have them match red. So it's okay if you've got a deck of cards that you stick in there with the cards that you've got. You're talking about shapes. You've got a set of cards because you've got diamonds. What else is in there? What is hearts? You got hearts, diamonds. So there's things that you can take with those games that you can play also with
Becky
kids.
and I found that Uno cards are more sociable with kids to get them to know each other better or even know who they are. Like, we had kids that would not speak to most of the people in the school, and they get in our class and play an Uno, and they're fighting, no, that wasn't right, and they're actually.
Yeah. That's a good thing, especially for older kids. And it's appropriate for older kids, right? It's not like playing the
And they
video
think
game.
that they're not doing work, they're
That's right.
playing Uno games, and
Yeah.
you sit and watch them, and they're actually communicating with each other, and not on their phones, or
That's right.
just not talking at all.
So you get social skills, you get a lot of social skills, you get some counting. I mean, you got some, that's working on working memory too. That helps with working memory, especially our kids that have like their MMD or FMD. If they have trouble with their working memory, Uno cards help that. So card games, sometimes they get a bad rap because they're actually really, really good. Because what are kids doing? If you're playing Uno, you got to match the color, shape, or number. Color, shape, number. Color, shape, number. Well, that's pretty complex if you think about that with the brain and how brain learns. So it's perfectly fine to give a deck of Uno cards and play some games with it. Especially the kid that's having trouble communicating. You might start with one color or two colors. Let's match colors, right? And you can play games with them to match colors. So the task is not as hard because they think it's a game. If you see Uno, they see older kids, like you're talking about playing. But again, it is a social skill because you're learning to take turns, right? You get to wait my turn. That's a big skill. And just talking, just having a conversation, especially for a nonverbal kids. But having these are just some tools and things that you might have. Play-Doh's good. Some people hate Play-Doh. Some people do not want Play-Doh in their bag. But y'all have Wiki sticks, right? So if kids are having trouble with letters, use the Wiki sticks. Put them right down on your paper and let them form letters with the Wiki sticks. The other thing about that is, once they make those letters, let them take their finger and trace them. Because there's a piece of that we know in the research for a lot of kids who have dyslexia. who have directionality problems or who have trouble remembering, they can touch and trace those letters, like the letter A, and they make the mark. They trace them, that gives them that they get that sensory, right? So we talk about sensory. So our kids that don't communicate, they have heightened sensitivity to sensory things. So those are ways that we can do that. You know that craft board that you can, it's like a knitting board, you can use that, let them write their letters on, and then when they take it off, they trace it. Same thing if it's a complex vocabulary word for middle or high school, they can still do the same thing. You take the words that they have for their grade level, and you practice those things with them, using those letters, so that they don't sing, because you know, when, I had a third grader that had really struggled with reading, but I gave him anything that was working on phonics. He said, that's a baby book, right? They get real frustrated if it doesn't look grade appropriate. That's why you can use other strategies like those wiki sticks, or you can have them trace on that board so that they can have something. But the textile pieces of it that they touch helps reinforce that in the brain. So it's a good practice. Pipe cleaners, you can make letters with pipe cleaners. Those cost about 97 cents and you can get a ton of those. You can make words with pipe cleaners and trace them. You can work with those, whatever it is you're working on. Dry erase boards are good, but they don't have that extra level of that sensory. But you can use dry erase, especially for kids that need to see it visually. So those are all good. And then paint. So anytime you're working with kids with writing, those are great ways to help. There's another little fun thing to do. On paper, and you just draw this out, and whatever you do. You just like you got a regular sheet of paper. We call this house paper. So here's our dotted line. Okay, so we got a house. And we have basics, right? So when we teach them letters, we can have them take that line of paper, and let's take the letter H. We're working on the letter H. We're going to write that letter. We'll say it, we'll write the letter, and it goes in the attic. So some are attic, some letters are formed with attic, and they stay in the house. The bottom part stays in the house. It helps them make that line of vision on that. All right, so let's say some letters are, they go in the basic right here. Right? That's another little thing that kids can look at and see. So you've got paper here, and you can just draw those right on there. Just draw those right on there to use for that. And so I gave you those to put in your folder, and take you several of them, and put them in there, and put them with your clear protector sheets, and so you've got them. So just as soon as you're working on something and you want kids to understand it, you got it right there, and you bring it out and show them how to do the letter formation. The same thing if they're writing bigger words, right? If they're trying to write their spelling and they're having trouble with spacing, or they're, and our kids have trouble all the time with spacing, writing letters too high or too low. We might start out with bigger, and then we move to smaller. You might start out with a crayon, right? We generally start out with a crayon, and then we move to pencil. So there's different ways to approach that. All right, and then for older kids or kids that have, part of the thing that they have trouble with is organizing their thinking. So I always use this one right here. I love this hamburger one. Right? So we're kind of brainstorming kids about how to, what time is it? 12. It's 12? Okay. It's time to eat. All right. So I'll just tell you about the hamburger one that we're going to eat. Okay. So I just draw this picture. I draw a hamburger for the kids because they need a visual. Bad going. But then this is the topic sentence, and then here's detail. And then here's so what we wanted to learn from this is that sometimes we can just create things that are visual for kids. We can do things with their hands. So anytime we can connect that, we can connect, like I said, Play-Doh, any kind of thing that we can connect to that, then we want to be able to do that, and that helps them be able to be successful in the classroom. And I went very quick, we didn't go through all of it, but I'll skip on over. Any questions or ideas?